All right, good evening. The time is now 5 o'clock on November 20th, and it's time to call the Public Safety Committee meeting to order. Thank you all for attending. City Clerk Jean, will you please note attendance for the record? Okay, thank you. All right, the first item up is the agenda approval. Committee members, have you had a chance to review the agenda? Any concerns? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. All right, typically at this time, we ask whether there are any members of the public who would like to speak to an item that is not on the agenda. To the extent that members of the public would like to address a specific item that is on the agenda, such as the ladder truck or police staffing, we would ask you to hold your comments until that time. At this time, there are no members of the public that are in City Hall, and there are no members of the public appearing online. Accordingly, we will move on. The next item up on the agenda is approval of the minutes. These are the minutes dated November 6th of 2023. Are there any concerns or revisions to the minutes?
No objections.
Seeing none, the minutes are approved. In that case, we will move on ahead to the ladder truck if we have. Yep. We've resolved any technical difficulties.
Should we take care of the former truck before that? You want to go out of order, I can give you the police staffing report.
All right. In that case, let's go ahead and hear the police staffing update first. City Administrator?
I'm happy to report that you have no vacancies in the police officers ranks at this time.
Fantastic.
The last offer was given last week and accepted. We have 3 people slated for the academy that begins in February. We have one candidate who just accepted, not assigned to a candidate, a date for the academy yet. We have 1 officer in FTO currently. We have 2 that just graduated from their FTO course and are on the streets. And currently we have 4 FTO instructors. And we will be gaining an additional 2 FTO instructors in 2024. We have people scheduled to go training at that time, which will give us a total of 6.
Fantastic. Community members, any questions or comments?
That sounds awesome. Motion to clap. Can I get a second?
Did I
Can
buy
I
you
get a
this?
second?
Yes. Well, that's great news. I know it's been a huge effort getting everybody in.
Apologize for anybody
So.
tuning in right now.
Nobody is listening to this meeting.
They are now.
There are at least 6 people.
Yeah, but we don't. All right, just going to share my screen here.
All right, Chief Bailey.
By way of intro, while he's doing that, when I first was asked to be the interim city administrator, I was also asked to go out to the fire department and meet the crews and also go to the police department and interact with those folks more than I had been as public works director. When I met with my first group of firefighters, one of the things that was top of their mind was the fact that they felt that they had too many specialized specially training requirements currently, and they were deeply concerned about the ladder truck because it's going to add more specialty training requirements. They also explained to me how things worked, and I asked the chief to prepare a presentation for you to explain that also. And so this is really me bringing that discussion forward that they wish to have brought forward, and chief is going to do that for us.
That is consistent with the feedback that I've received as well.
Exactly.
That it's too much.
As I have as well.
Perfect. I can scratch intro off the.
Yeah. Well,
So tonight there was just kind of 5 main areas that I wanted to talk about, which is going to be the need, which is kind of the need for a ladder truck, and I'm going to probably bounce back and forth between saying ladder truck or I might just say truck. It's the same thing. Engine is the fire engine, and then ladder or truck usually refers to a ladder truck. So we're gonna talk about the need, really, that's just kind of what was what was said before regarding the ladder truck and what's in the CIP. Talk about the cost, talk about some of the training, the staffing that we need to run a ladder truck. And then just lastly, talk about how it would be used, what the response is gonna be for the ladder truck. I know it's gonna be too small for you to see, but this just a reminder that it was put in the CIP in regards 1.5 was put in there, saying that we needed a ladder truck based on height in the city and any buildings that were greater than 3 stories, which is about roughly 35 feet. And then it talked about the need based on the WSRB. So that's kind of what I want to talk about first is what was put in there and what was discussed the first time. The recommendation for versus required. First of all, I want to talk about the Washington Survey and Ratings Bureau, just as a reminder what that is, if you don't remember. It's an independent, not-for-profit organization operating in the public interest. They provide data to insurance companies. Insurance companies then use that data to come up with the rates. The thing that's important about the WSRB is it's not the classification system that they give you, the number that they give you. It's a piece of insurance rates, but it's not all of it. So we don't know necessarily what the calculation is that the insurance company uses or how much, say, moving from one classification to the next would affect the rates. But from what I've been told, it's pretty minimal and it's just a piece of it. So just to go more into it, it provides us a classification to cities, fire departments, or fire districts. And what it looks at is it gives you a rating from 1 to 10 based on points or credits that you get. And they look at the capabilities of the fire department, the water supply, emergency communication system, fire safety control. And those are all the different pieces that go into that rating system. Just as a snapshot of what we have in the state, there's only 1 department in the state that has the number 1, which is the highest, 16 that have 2, 70 that have 3, 89 that have 4, 5 that have 130, and then it goes on from there. Right now, currently, the city is sitting at 3.65. So we're right, just a little bit above the middle of the 3 classification. Specifically to talk about the ladder truck, of the credits of all the different things that are part of our rating, of the credit that we get for the ladder truck, for having a ladder truck, we're only getting 33% of those points right now. That's basically just based on our mutual aid partners. Even if that was 100%, if we had our own ladder truck, that wouldn't be enough to move us up into the next classification. We would have to address a bunch of other deficiencies or areas that we're losing some credit before we would even get close to getting above, getting to the next level to get to a 2. And that would be looking at things like staffing, training, water supply, station location, some other big ticket items. So just by not having a ladder truck, it's not enough to move us up 1 classification. The other thing I want to talk about need has to do with accreditation. Some of the questions that were raised, is it going to affect our accreditation to not have a ladder truck? What I wanted to point out is that the agency having jurisdiction, which is the city, the council, it makes the determination on the needs for the department. All that the accreditation does is provide recommendations. They can't come out and say, you need to have this or you need to have that. That's not their job. Their job is to say, here's something that you might need to look at, something you might need to study, but they can't force us to have one thing or another. And so when they came out for our last accreditation, they did say that they wanted us to study the need for a ladder truck, but by not purchasing a ladder truck for the city, it's not going to affect our accreditation in any way. Because we've done the due diligence, we've done the research, we've looked into whether we need one or not, we've done what they've recommended, but it's not like when they come out this next time, it'll be a deficiency that we don't have. The last thing to talk about was just currently kind of give you a snapshot of where we are with the buildings in the city that are above roughly 3 stories. And there's 8, the Salish, the Panorama Apartments, the hotel up on the ridge, the high school, Square One, which is same building where like Novo, those 2 ones where like Novo is. The self-storage has some in the very back based on the height. The Woodland condos up on the ridge, and then Pickering Court in some areas. Those are all ones that are just either above 3 stories or just right under it. The important thing to point out with all those, except for the Woodland and Pickering Court, those are all sprinkled buildings. Those already have sprinkles inside, which make that, the risk of those buildings in a fire in those buildings goes way down already because of the sprinkler. Pickering Court does have sprinklers, but it's just in the laundry room. And the Woodland has some too, but it's just in the garage area. It's not in the houses. So, I want to point out with that too, is that the general consensus, and we'll talk a little bit later when we talk about response, is the general consensus is buildings that have have sprinklers in them, especially large buildings when we're talking about hotels or some of the things that we have, like the high school, hotels, or some of the big buildings up on the ridge, is the best way to fight a fire in those buildings is to put the fire out as quick as you can, not spending time going around rescuing people from windows and things like that. That doesn't happen like it does on TV and the movies. The best thing is get to the fire, put it out, and the sprinklers will help keep that down. Usually we recommend to people they shelter in place, not to try and exit the building. They stay where they're at. Like if we're talking about the hotel or things like that, if there's one room that's on fire, it's best just to focus on that one room. So that just kind of goes over the need, or to talk about what was previously discussed about the need for a ladder truck. The next one I want to talk about is just some of the initial purchase costs of the ladder truck. When this was first proposed, the original ask was for $1.5 million. I talked with some of the vendors, and currently that base price is closer to $2 million for a ladder truck. Granted, there might be some other dollars available with the area over with the mill site, but you're looking at probably about $2 million for the ladder truck, probably, and then probably another $100,000 for associated equipment to go with it. Maintenance on the ladder truck, I checked into it. Contractually, the cost to have a ladder truck is the same as the cost to have an engine with our current maintenance contract with the fire garage in zone 3. But that being said, although the base cost is the same for the contract, there would be more increased labor costs for the times that they come out, because we do pay for labor when they come out, and we do pay for extra labor when they come out, and we do pay for parts. So when you're looking at a ladder truck, although it's not any more for the contract, you are looking at double the amount of tires, double the amount of axles, brake systems, etc. So the parts, the cost, the risk of something going wrong is a lot higher for that also. They do have 2 dedicated individuals at the fire garage that work specifically on aerials, so they do have staff that are trained in how to service an aerial or a ladder truck, but it would be a higher expense. Additionally, on top of what we normally have with our fire engines, they require quarterly on-site inspections and maintenance that they have to come out and do. Right now, the engines only are done once. At ladder trucks, would have to be done 4 times a year. There'd be no backup for the ladder. That's a need constantly in the region. There's only 6 or 7 ladder trucks around the whole county, and when they go out of service, there's nothing to replace them. There's no backup, especially something this size. There's no backup that you can put in place like we can now with the fire engine. And then also, they just told me, talking with the maintenance people, is they just have a higher incidence of out of service times. When they do break down, it takes longer to fix them, and it's harder to get the parts and to get them back on the road. The last thing just to talk about real quick is the mayor wanted me to give you an update on the build times. Currently, the manufacturers are saying for anything, an engine or a ladder truck is now 2 years. If you remember, when we ordered our last engine, that was 18 months, and they told me that we're still on track for that. So we're looking at August, September, somewhere around that of 2024. So we are on track with that one, but the engine that we replaced is replacing our 2004 American La France. The 2009 Crimson is going to be coming up also here in just a couple of years, and hopefully it's going to make it to 2029, because it does have over 100,000 miles on it. So that is something we're going to have to be thinking about as we look forward in the next year or two. Because of that build time, we're probably going to need to start discussing our needs for the next engine and how we're going to accomplish that in the next year or two, because it does take probably 6 months to a year to plan and spec it, and then it's going to be another 2 years to have it built. So that's kind of where they're sitting at with the build times. The next thing I just want to talk about with that Mike already mentioned, that the city administrator already mentioned, is the additional training that would cost for the ladder truck. Currently, our staff is not trained to operate a ladder truck or an aerial. It's a specialized skill. Yes, there are pieces, ventilation, some things like that our firefighters already know, but to actually use a bigger piece of apparatus like that, it's a different set of skill for driving. It's a heavier apparatus, especially with the tight areas up on the ridge. That'd be a real challenge for learning. It's a new set of skills for apparatus placement, where you park it on the fire scene, as well as how to use the ladder on a scene. And then lastly, usually with trucks or ladder trucks, is the people that are on it are usually trained in other skills that's higher than the normal firefighter. Confined space, trench rescue, rope rescue, things like that. Those are all things that a truckie, which they call the people that work on the ladder trucks, that's the skills that they would have to have. So you're looking at initial training and cost, just kind of break down some of the numbers. You're looking at about 14 hours of initial drive time per person. The truck academy, how to operate it is 5 days, 40 hours. Specialties, trench, confined space, structural collapse, each one of those are 5 days, 40 hours for the class. And then an aerial operations class would be 3 days, 40 hours. Altogether, you're looking at probably an estimated about extra 182 hours of training for our people, just for the initial training. And the way that we operate right now, we train everybody to do every task. So that's for 12 people. So when you look at overtime costs, fees for the classes, you're looking at about just over 13,000 per person for training, or for all 12 members, you're looking at just about 160,000 in training, just for the initial training to get started with the ladder truck. The next piece there would be talking about some of the staffing needs, how we would need to probably up staff and get more personnel because of the ladder truck. Currently, we're staffed with 4 personnel per shift. That's 1 company officer, a lieutenant, and 3 firefighters. We drop down to 3 if we have a person with the day off. So we'll go down to 3-person minimum. And that means that right now we're cross-staffed with an engine and the A-car. We take whatever is dispatched. If it's dispatched with the engine, we take that. A-car, we take that. One goes, the other one goes out of service. So that's how we're currently set up. Ladder truck, staffing for a ladder truck is recommended for, generally looking around the zone, most companies will have, ladder trucks have 4 personnel on the ladder. But again, they'll go down to 3 minimum, some departments, but you're looking at 3 or 4 personnel for the ladder truck. And nobody is currently cross-staffing the ladder truck right now. So just like I talked about the engine and the A-car, it's the same crew that runs it. All the ladders that are in the region right now, nobody's cross-staffing with anything else. They're a specialized unit just for the ladder truck. Doesn't mean they can't go on aid calls or things like that, but they don't, they're not responsible for jumping in the A-car or jumping in the ladder truck. They're usually focused on just the ladder truck skills. So looking at that, in a perfect world, to staff independently a ladder truck, it's going to require 12 personnel, 4 per shift with a 3-person minimum. Now, there are some ways we could look at it. We could have maybe the A-car available and then cross-staff an engine and a ladder truck together. But either way, you probably look at it, we have to have 2 rigs available. We wouldn't be able to triple cross-staff and have an engine, an A-car, and a ladder all with the same crew. It's just way too much training and way too much for the one crew to take that on. So, but even if we talked about, like I said, maybe having an A-car and an engine / ladder available, you're still looking at probably adding 6 to 7 people to the staffing to be able to staff that extra rig. Currently, the cost of an entry-level firefighter with benefits is $136,000. So if you're looking at adding 6 personnel, that'd be $817,000. Or if you're looking at 12, you're at 1.6 million. So those are just kind of some of the basic, costs of what it would look like for adding people. But again, we really couldn't do it and do it right with the staffing that we have right now. If we wanted to do it, we'd have to add more staffing to have 2 rigs available, not just the 1. The last thing I kind of want to talk here is response, and that's basically how it would be utilized if we did have one in the city, just to kind of give you a little bit of the pros and cons and kind of give you an insight of how we operate right now. So currently for a response, for a fire response in the city, if it was a residential fire, you're going to get 4 engines and 2 ladders, and these would all be coming from our mutual aid partners. For a commercial fire, you'd be getting 6 engines and 2 ladders. That's currently what the response plans are set up. So that means that you would have a ladder coming from probably east side, which the closest one for them would be Issaquah, or it'd be the second one would be either Redmond or Bellevue, depending on who's closer, who's out on a call. Those where those 2 engines would come from. And we actually have it, our plans are tweaked just a little bit differently than the rest of the zone, because the way we operate out here, we don't necessarily need 2 ladders, especially if that second ladder is coming from, say, Kirkland. the 45 minutes it takes to get here isn't gonna do me any good. I need personnel on scene to fight the fire, so we have it built into our response plans. If the second ladder is greater than 30 minutes away, they're just gonna send us the next closest engine. So instead of getting 2 ladders, we get 1 ladder, the closest one, and then, another engine. Based on that 4 or 5, we'd have to have 1 more engine in its place. That's what we're doing right now. And then just to talk about how it would be utilized on the scene. Our initial response, the first crew is responsible for setting, the first engine that shows up on scene is responsible for establishing the water supply. They set up your initial lines and they set up the initial command. As soon as the second engine arrives, which is either probably going to be Fall City or North Bend, the first crew will go interior and the second crew takes over command and sets up Rick, and Rick is the rapid response crew. Again, that has to go back to the 2 in, 2 out. You remember talking about that in the past. It says if we set 2 people inside the fire, we have to keep 2 people outside, packed up, ready to go to rescue them in case something happens. So that's kind of how it goes with a fire. The first and second crew are going to be responsible for that, setting up the 2 in, 2 out and getting command in place. If there is a rescue situation, the first engine arriving on scene could go interior with 3 personnel. 2 would go inside and 1 person would stay out, the pump operator. But again, that's in a rescue situation. They say, somebody's inside the house. We know somebody's inside. They can go inside and try and rescue them. But normally you have to have the 2 in, 2 out. So how does a ladder truck fit in this situation? A ladder truck, usually when they arrive on scene, if they're the first or second unit, they might even take over, they'll take over command, do some of that stuff that I just talked about. They might be utilized as an engine. When a ladder truck gets on scene, their main job is either to go to the roof, if they need to cut a hole in the roof for ventilation, or they're in charge of search and rescue. So once you've established the 2 in, 2 out, they might go in and do a primary or secondary search of the building. It's very rare that the ladder truck shows up on scene and is putting a ladder, like I was talking about earlier, putting a ladder to a window to rescue somebody or to a balcony or something like that. Usually they're utilizing other tasks other than their ladder. Most of the time when the ladder is used is either to get somebody to the roof of a commercial building to cut a hole in it, or a lot of times it's used to as a platform where they can raise it up and shoot water down inside of a defensive fire. That's usually what happens with the ladder truck. And again, it's very, very rare that they're gonna ladder a residential building. If they do, it'd be with ground ladders. They don't usually use their main aerial on their engine for doing a residential. And especially residentials, most of the time, we don't go on roofs very much anymore because of the lightweight truss. Usually they'll say that we only have about 5 to 10 minutes of burn time before those collapse. So it's not very often you actually see residentials having holes cut in the roof anymore. Mainly it's the commercial larger buildings. And that's to keep it from spreading to an adjacent building. So based on some of that information is, the way that we operate here in Snoqualmie is we can afford to have the ladder truck as a 3rd or 4th. It's not like it needs to arrive on scene first. And if we show up, say for example, there's a fire in the city, we show up with our ladder truck, it's never going to be utilized as a ladder. They're going to be busy doing, like I talked about, setting up initial lines, setting up a command. They're not going to be setting it up as a ladder truck. Again, they're very rarely used for life safety. It doesn't happen like you see on the TV. The best tactics for large buildings, like I said earlier, is to shelter in place or have the sprinklers take care of keeping the fire knocked down so we can get people out. But there are some benefits of having a ladder, and that usually has to do with the rescue benefits. I talked earlier about usually ladder trucks come with special skills. The people that work on the ladder trucks are trained in trench confined space. A lot of times hazmat, those are kind of considered specialties for the ladder crew. Currently, we're only at the ops level, operations level for those specialties. We don't have any technicians in trench or confined space. So if we did have a ladder truck, the benefit would we would have those people on scene sooner, those subject matter experts. But to point out, usually those bigger things like trench confined space, those are long instances, and it's not like the first in crews need to be there on scene. Usually the first crews are going to recon the scene, and they're going to deny entry and wait for those other crews to get there. So yes, we would have the benefit of having subject matter experts in some of these other disciplines, but by having those come from our neighbors, it's not going to necessarily mess up our operations too much, because usually the techs for those things aren't the initial response anyway. They're those are the instances that we're there for an hour or 2 hours. Getting things set up, before they actually go inside. We do have tech level swift water and rope also are considered, skills that a ladder truck crew might have, but we already have those already. It's mandatory for all our members to be rope and swift water techs. So we already have that skill. So we're going to be gaining extra with the ladder company. The last thing would just be to talk about availability of a ladder truck and how it would be, what would happen. I mean, we've talked numerous times, you've mentioned it, Councilmember Watton, about how many times we're going into our neighbor's area. If we had a ladder truck, that would, in my opinion, that would go up greatly because all of a sudden we would become the second ladder. So instead of if there was a fire in Fall City, we would be going with the ladder. Or if there was a fire in Issaquah, we would probably be the next close. Right now, we don't go on a fire in Issaquah. They have other engines. But if we were the second ladder, we'd get pulled into Issaquah, we'd get pulled into Sammamish, possibly Redmond, over the top of 18, just because we would be the next closest ladder. So we'd be out of the city more often. We would also be utilized more on the freeway, the way that our neighbors like to operate, the ones that cover, east side that covers 18 and 90, is they use ladder trucks as blockers. Those that they get arrive on scene and they use it as a big divider, basically, a big barrier to keep from people ramming into, citizens not paying attention, ramming into the car accidents. Again, if we had a ladder truck, we'd get pulled further out on 18 or 90 than we currently are. And we'd be, using a $2 million piece of apparatus as a traffic cone. So again, that's, in my opinion, that's kind of, it's going to pull us out of the city more than we currently are if we had a ladder truck or if we were cross-staffed with a ladder. I know that's a lot of information I kind of threw at you there, but I was just kind of trying to go over some of the facts. Is there any questions I can answer based on some of the stuff that I threw out? I mean, I know some of it's probably not new information, but I wanted to kind of give a full picture of what we'd be looking at if we were going to continue down the path of our next piece of apparatus being a ladder truck.
And just to confirm too, if our ladder truck is being pulled out on 18 and 90 and whatnot, then obviously we would not have someone here to respond to the extent that our citizens are making the phone calls and needing assistance, correct? We would have to wait till whoever was the next closest after that.
We'd have to wait probably for Issaquah. And granted, we are pulled out on the freeway right now for an engine or an 8 car, but if we have the ladder truck, I think we'd be pulled out further. So there'd be more instances up and over 18. So yes, we are utilizing our engine right now just because we're the closest unit, but I think we'd be pulled even more with the ladder truck because other than east side, the next closest ladders are Bellevue and Redmond. We would be the closest. So we would go we'd go down to Issaquah, we'd go pretty far out toward Carnation, possibly up and over to 18 into Maple Valley. So it'd be utilized more, taking us out of the city more. And that's kind of what I was pointing back to. If we wanted to do it, we would really have to look at having 2 rigs available. Having if we had an 8 car and an engine and / ladder available or vice versa. That's, I think, is the only way that we could do it and not be running out of the city
Right.
the whole day.
Councilor Benson.
It's strange that an argument against getting the ladder truck is that there aren't enough ladder trucks. That where should the next ladder truck go?
Honestly, if it was my opinion, a city this size, usually a ladder truck isn't a luxury they can afford. You rely on your neighbors. I would think that if we did, with the growth that's going on in the city, if we were able to down the road do some kind of a partnership with Fall City, maybe where we could have between the 2 cities, the 2 areas, we could have 3 rigs available, as in an engine, an 8 car, and a ladder truck. That could make sense down the road. I wouldn't be surprised if Eastside adds a second, since they've added Mercer Island, they've added Woodinville. Woodinville has the second ladder for them, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's on their plans for the future to add another one somewhere in Eastside's area to cover, Mercer Island in that area. But again, I think it goes back to they're considered specialty pieces of apparatus. And you look at, we have a fire, we have 4 or 6 engines responding, only 1 or 2 ladder trucks. And even then, usually the ladder trucks are utilized for something other than, they're considered, kind of the specialists in the fire service in regards to, they have more training in certain areas. And so they're used for that, but it's not very often that they're used for actual rescue. And for our size city, what we have right now, I think the mutual aid partners that we have are going to serve us right now. But again, looking down the road, it might make more sense if we're adding a second station, we're getting another big development in the city, or maybe working with one of our partners to do some kind of a joint venture. But with the other issues we have right now with staffing and our other pieces of the fleet that are aging, I think it's a luxury that we really can't probably afford at this time, that our
But
mutual aid partners would be adequate.
Where ideally, not down the road, say you've got a magic fireman wand and you can just zap a ladder truck right where it should go to properly serve the region, where would that ladder truck land?
I would say probably in North Bend, either North Bend. If we were talking about, departments are all together and jurisdictional lines didn't occur, I would say probably North Bend or Snoqualmie, just because of what's around us. But again, it would have to be a case of, having more resources. When you look at the number of calls that we have up in this area, it's, Snoqualmie, Fall City and North Bend, they don't necessarily, it wouldn't be utilized a lot, but when you're looking at gaps, because there's one in Issaquah, there's one in Bellevue has two, Redmond has one, Kirkland has one, and then you're talking about Bothell and Shoreline are where the other ladder trucks are. Those, and then if you go over the top of 18, then you're talking about Kent would be the next closest one. So, I would say either putting it back up in North Bend. They used to have one in North Bend before they pulled it out. Either putting one up in North Bend or having another one that is somehow located. If they had one in Issaquah, we had another one that was kind of located in that Duval Carnation area that could kind of service both. I think those would be the areas probably you would look at wanting to put one if we're not, talking jurisdictional lines.
When Chief Carrera was here, he was recommending that we get a ladder truck, and especially considering the development in the mill site that's coming, where there are going to be more buildings of that height. And my personal concern is the high school. Now, you've said that the sprinklers are that's a sprinklered building, but do sprinklered buildings never need a ladder truck in a fire
I
situation?
would say that sprinkler buildings have a higher instance of keeping the fire to the area of origin. So if you're talking about the high school, if a fire started in one of the classrooms, the sprinklers would keep it confined to that area. More than likely. I mean, there's always, different things, but the reason behind the sprinklers is it keeps it down and it keeps it confined to an area so that when we show up with our hose, we'd have a better chance of being able to put it out.
Right on, but my question is, what is the point of a ladder truck at this point? Is it only to protect old buildings that don't have sprinklers? Or
The point of a ladder truck if we're talking about the city right now, the point of the ladder truck would be able to get on top of some of the commercial buildings that we have. If there was a fire in a commercial building on the roof where there's not sprinklers on the roof, if we were trying to keep it from extending to other parts of the building, the ladder truck, the crew could get up on top and use a trench cut or use ventilation to open up the roof. That would be one. I would say the other would be, the benefit right now would be if we're trying to get somebody on the downtown floor, even though it's not 3 stories, trying to get somebody up on one of those roofs quickly. Even though we could use a ground ladder, we would probably use a ladder truck to get someone on those roofs to be able to cut a hole in the roof, a trench to keep it going from one, going down the strip mall. And there's the other pieces, like I said, the trench confined space, but really for the size of the city right now, it's not, like I said, it's not like we're going to be going and using it to take people out of windows, rescuing people off balconies. One, we can't get close enough to them the way that some of the areas are designed, but it's just not, I mean, great, there's always something that could happen, but when you look at the types of calls that we've had, it just doesn't, the risk isn't there as high as some of the other things that we have to deal with. Hopefully that kind of answered it a little bit.
I'm still kind of confused as to why Chief Carrera was recommending the ladder truck, and based on your presentation, it feels like you're saying that ladder trucks are relatively unnecessary in an era when buildings are built with sprinklers. And so I'm confused about that. I'm admittedly not a fireman and I have no knowledge of, but so I'm trying to convey to you my confusion. I had a great deal of respect for you and a great deal of respect for Chief Carrera. So where we cut the baby on that is confusing to me as well. So I'm just trying to understand
Right.
at this point why ladder trucks exist.
I would think for one, in talks with Chief Carrera before he left, is he viewed the ladder truck as a vehicle for getting us more staffing. To be honest, that was in my conversations with him. Yes, we do have some risks in the city, but he knew that if we had a ladder truck, we would be able to need more staffing to run that ladder truck, and it was a way to build the department to get it bigger. In regards to how the ladders would be used, again, I think it goes back again to when you look at the historical fires that we've had in the city. We have higher risks. Yes, having a ladder truck would benefit the city. I just think that based on the size the department is right now, it's and the way that we're currently overworked with the different, jack of all trades that our guys are working on, our guys and gals are working on, I think a ladder truck is a luxury. If we do at some point decide to grow the department to where we need, where our call volume gets to the point where we need a second station, or like maybe I said, if we're partnering with Fall City, then I could see it making sense. But for right now, we have, our other apparatus needs, keeping the, having a second rig for like an 8-car and an engine available is a better cost benefit for the city. You're going to get a better bang for your buck to have 2 rigs available, an engine and an 8-car, than a ladder truck, because the skills that a ladder truck would utilize, waiting 15 minutes for one to come to Issaquah isn't going to hurt us. It's not going to put us behind the 8 ball when we're fighting a fire. We can still use ground letters on most of our buildings. We can go interior and put out the fires that way. Even on some of the commercial buildings, they all have stairs that go up to the roof. There's other ways that we can, the things that a ladder truck can do for us, there's other ways that we can get that same thing done. Again, down the road, it might make sense for us, but right now, it just, for the cost of it and what we would need, it doesn't, the cost benefit doesn't pencil out.
Councilmember Washington.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. I appreciate your presentation. And so we've got a couple things. One is capital improvement plan, which would cost us $2 million. We penciled in $1.5 million. The second piece to it is personnel, because it will immediately increase our cost by a good $1 million a year between personnel and training, that we're going to be coming under a lot of, other demands for those resources. Third is almost 80% of the calls are aid calls. Very few are fire. And then we look at the structures and then the risk of what we have. Mutual aid is the fourth one, which you mentioned. And by the way, the last 2 weeks, I've noticed a lot more mutual aid going by my office in North Bend. So I get to keep a tally, and, again, 3/4 of those are aid cars and the other ones are, the engines rolling by. So I'm very sensitive to that. Fifth, and that is the cross training that we really need to address with the staff in order to retain our staff, because it's insane that we have to have, such a small crew, and they are Swiss Army knives when it comes, and they do a fabulous job, but it also means putting our staff, as we all get older, which I can relate to, at a greater risk of injury, just because so much is demanded in keeping the recertifications going. With all that, there's probably 20 other things that I could think of that we could spend this money on. And is this the right place? Including having more staff in the department.
Right. And that's right.
So,
I think,
anyway.
like I was saying, as pointed out, I think our focus should be on replacing the apparatus that we have right now and increasing our staffing levels somehow to where we get to the point where we maybe have the engine and available so that we have a vehicle in the city more often for unit reliability and we're not out all the time. You know, if we had 2,000 or 3,000 calls a year, and we had more buildings or we had a lot of fires, then I would say that maybe our risk would be more toward the ladder truck that would need to be our next purchase. But I just don't see that yet. And like you said, it seems like there's some other things that we need to address before we get to that point. Now, if there wasn't a ladder truck in Issaquah, then that maybe is a different, you know, if our closest ladder truck was half an hour away, 45 minutes away, then maybe that would factor into our risk, benefit, our risk analysis. But right now, with the current setup and the way that we have the mutual aid coming from the different areas and the way that the ladder would be used, it seems like there's, you know, that's something that could wait for down the road. If the city got bigger, if we got more commercial, things like that.
Yeah.
If we got, like I said, if we got to really do it right, we would have to have a dedicated crew. Not the Swiss Army knife of triple cross between engine aid and ladder truck. It just doesn't work. And like I said, there's nobody that's doing that right now. They're all dedicated ladder companies.
I'm good.
Okay. Councilor Benson, anything further?
No, yeah, I'm sufficiently confused now.
Yeah. Well,
That was the goal. And I'd be more than happy, you know, outside of the setting too, to have you come to my office or I can meet you. So we could talk some more about some of your concerns as to how we actually would utilize the ladder truck or what, if we did have one, how it would be utilized.
That's a good idea.
You know, I can go through it with you a little bit more, just to kind of try and answer. some
Well,
of the
and
questions.
you know, the way you've described it, it seems to me that if this is the way these apparatuses are utilized in the region, that maybe there should be some regional money. You know, if in fact the gap in the ladder truck supply is in Snoqualmie, North Bend area, then maybe the county needs to help out with the funding of the truck and its staffing over the long term. Because, you know, one of your arguments for saying we shouldn't get a ladder truck is there aren't enough ladder trucks. And that tells me that yes, maybe this isn't entirely a Snoqualmie city problem, but it's definitely a regional problem. It's definitely regional. If there aren't enough ladder trucks for the region, then there needs to be more ladder trucks in the region. And you're right, Snoqualmie is a small town, but if it's perfectly situated to address that, then maybe we need to get some help in funding its existence.
And I think, you know, there are grants. I mean, we tried once before to apply for a ladder truck through the FEMA grants. We can try again, different times, but you know, when you look at a regionalization approach, some of the things that we've talked about in the past, I mean, there's other ways that, you know, we could look at it. Maybe you're sharing a vehicle with somebody, maybe, you know, for example, like I said, you between Fall City and Snoqualmie and our call volume, maybe that makes sense to have, you know, if we're talking about how many rigs you need available between these two cities, having an engine and a ladder and an A car all independently staffed would make sense for two. It just doesn't necessarily make sense for us by ourselves, or maybe it's a regional approach with some of our partners and maybe it's owned by somebody else, but it's kept at our station. I mean, there's different ways that we can look at it down the road. I think as we get closer to where, like if the mill site ever gets up and going and we get more buildings that are taller buildings and it becomes more of a risk, then we can maybe look at it again. But again, I would think that we want to look at some kind of collaborative approach, not just a Snoqualmie ladder truck, because we're, you know, the size that we are right now and the amount of calls that we have now just really doesn't pencil out for a standalone ladder truck by itself.
thank you. With that, we are at the end of our agenda. So unless there's anything further, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
Unanimous.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Chief.
Chief.
Sure.
I don't know how long it is before I'll see you again, but hopefully soon.
If you can find a ladder truck for
Yeah.
Councilmember Benson, I think he really wants to go through the training
And even
first.
then, we wouldn't